In the ancient world, the social contract was clear. The warrior class, known as Kshatriyas, held a monopoly on force for the sole purpose of protecting society. They carried the weapons so that everyone else could live in peace. But the system produced an anomaly. King Kartavirya Arjuna possessed overwhelming military power. The texts describe him as having 1,000 arms, a physical representation of total, inescapable dominance. With that level of unchecked strength, the protectors turned into oppressors. The ruling class began hoarding wealth and terrorizing the people, leaving a vacuum where justice once existed. When a system of protection becomes a society's greatest threat, diplomacy fails. This crisis requires a violent external correction to restore the world's balance. Far away from those corrupt capitals, in an isolated forest ashram, lived sage Jamadagni, his wife Renuka, and their son, Ram. Ram stood apart from the ruling warlords. He was an ascetic, a young Dan completely focused on spiritual discipline and self-mastery rather than political conquest. To test his own absolute discipline, Ram subjected himself to extreme, punishing penance, dedicated to Lord Shiva. Recognizing this dedication, Shiva granted him a divine, unstoppable weapon, the Parashu, or axe. From that moment, he was known as Parashurama. This sets up an inevitable collision. What happens when the ultimate weapon of destruction is wielded by a man of absolute peace, right as the world's rulers descend into total tyranny? These worlds collided when King Arjuna marched his massive army directly to sage Jamadagni's humble ashram. The sage welcomed them. Using the power of Kamadhenu, a divine wish-granting cow, he was able to miraculously feed the entire army, producing a lavish feast in the middle of the wilderness. The king responded to this generosity with greed. He viewed Kamadhenu as an asset to be seized and ordered his men to forcefully drag the cow away. Parashurama retaliated immediately. He tracked the army, confronted the king, struck down the 1,000-armed ruler in direct combat, and brought the divine cow back home. Parashurama secured immediate justice, but striking down a sovereign king ignited an irreversible cycle of vengeance that would change the world forever. The king's sons avoided a direct confrontation with Parashurama. They bided their time, waiting until he left the ashram to gather supplies in the forest. While he was gone, they ambushed the camp and brutally murdered the unarmed sage Jamadagni. When Parashurama returned to find his father murdered, something inside him snapped. The quiet ascetic vanished, replaced by a singular, terrifying focus. Standing over his father's body, he made an absolute vow. He would eradicate every corrupt warrior bloodline from the face of the earth. He carried out this campaign on a global scale. Texts state he circled the world 21 times to execute his vow. This dismantled the warrior class entirely. He tracked the corrupt lineages across 21 generations, triggering the total collapse of the political structure. Rather than mindless slaughter, the texts describe a calculated, surgical removal of systemic oppression. Parashurama channeled his grief into a force of divine wrath, violently resetting a geopolitical landscape that had failed its people. Then comes the most shocking turn in the legend, the moment the global purge abruptly ends, by Parashurama's own choice. He had cleared the world of tyrants and left countless thrones empty, yet he refused to take power for himself. He walked into the forest and laid down his weapon forever. The bringer of death returned to a life of quiet penance. Having completed his task, he abandoned his wrath entirely. In later eras, his legacy shifted. He became the ultimate guru, passing down his martial skills and strict discipline to legendary figures like Bhishma and Karna. This story presents two distinct models of power. The kings hoarded strength for their own greed and broke the world. Parashurama wielded it with a specific purpose and then voluntarily walked away. Anger is often viewed as a purely destructive flaw, but when rooted in devotion, directed solely at injustice, and kept under absolute control, righteous anger becomes a society's ultimate